Okay, we're on DAF Tzadi Gimel Amid Aleph, and we have a three-way machlokes Tanoim that we started discussing yesterday. The three-way machlokes is between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon regarding two people carrying something or doing any other kind of malacha on Shabbos when they share the malacha. Rabbi Meir holds that unconditionally, regardless of how many people are doing the malacha, if you're a participant in the malacha, you're going to be chayiv. So two people who carry outside on Shabbos are always chayiv. Reb Shimon says, just fakert. Anytime two people do the malacha, they're always pater, no matter what. And now you have the middle position of Rabbi Yehuda, which is the main position of our Mishnah, which is that it depends. If the object could be carried independently by one person and two people choose to carry it, so then they're both going to be pater. But if the object is so heavy, it's a big, big thing, and so it needs to be carried by two people, that's the normal way of carrying it, is with two people. So then when two people carry it, they are doing a malacha, they're going to be chayiv. Okay, so that's the three ways, the three-way machlokes. And now the Gemara is going to explain the basis of the machlokes based on in scriptural interpretation. Line 7 on Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph, b'maika miflagi, b'haikra. The machlokes is just in this one phrase in the pasuk. V'im nefesh achas techeta bishkaga me'am haaretz ba'asasa. The Torah says, this is not in reference specifically to Melecha Shabbos, but we are applying it to Melecha Shabbos, that if one soul sins unintentionally from among the people of the land in its performance of it, ba'asosa, with a mapikeh, doing it. So the Gemara points out that there are a number of extraneous words in this pasuk. Reb Shimon Sover Tlosim Yudek Sivi. Reb Shimon says that there are three words that are coming to exclude the halacha of having to bring a korban chatas for a sin that are contained in this pasuk. Nefesh techeta, achas techeta, and ba'asosa techeta. Those three words really can be appended to the word techeta in the pasuk. So if the nefesh sins, if the achas, if the one sins, and in its performance of the act it sins, in all of those cases, the sin that is being addressed by those three words are excluded from the obligation to bring a korban. So what are those three exclusions? So the first exclusion is for a case where a person only does half the malacha, where one person does the akira and the other person does the hanacha. One person picks it up, the other person puts it down, and therefore when you're doing only half a malacha, that surely should be excluded from a korban. The next miut is lemeute zeyachol v'zeyachol, is when both people can carry it independently and they choose to carry it jointly. That also is excluded from being liable. And finally, the third miut, v'chad lemeute ze eino yachol v'ze eino yachol. Why do you have a third exclusion? The third exclusion is even when you need them both to carry it because it's so heavy, nevertheless, the Torah only obligates you a korban chatas, only makes you liable for the malacha when you're the sole performer of the malacha. That's across the board according to Reb Shimon based upon these three words in the pasuk.
So if they did a b'mezid, they would also be...
If you did a b'mezid, you'd also be pater, presumably, because we have a connection between shogeg and mezid. Anytime you're chayiv a korban shogeg, then you're chayiv misa if you do it b'mezid.
So he just really reviewed the three. We've already sort of known these things, but...
This is Rabbi Shimon's position. Rabbi Shimon says that he's explaining based on scripture how I know that in all of these three aforementioned cases you're always going to be pater. But that's only according to Rabbi Shimon. Now we got to analyze the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. So let's go to Rabbi Yehuda now. The Rabbi Yehuda chad lemeute ze oker v'ze meniach. So one phrase in the pasuk is to exclude a case where one picks up and one puts down. The other exclusion is to exclude when the object is light enough, like a loaf of bread, where each one could carry it himself. And so if they choose to carry it together, they're excluded from the malacha. And the third miut, not like Reb Shimon says, is according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's to exclude the following case. The Beis Din tells a person, go ahead and do a malacha. It's mutter. He goes ahead and does the malacha. And then they discover that the Beis Din made a terrible mistake. is this man, the individual, is he chayav a korban or not? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the third miyut in the pasuk is coming to tell you that he's not chayav a korban. He's potter in that case because he's considered like an ones. How is he supposed to know if the rabbis tell him to go ahead and do a malacha? How is he supposed to know that what he's doing is wrong? That's even less of a culpability than a shogeg. It's an ones. It's completely by accident, and therefore he's potter. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda's third miyut is not the same as Reb Shimon's, and that's the basis of the machlokas. Reb Shimon uses the third miyut to tell me that even when you need both of them to carry it, you're potter, and Reb Yehuda says no. When you need both of them to carry it, that's not excluded by the pasuk. They're going to be chayiv over there. The third miyut is to tell me that when the Beis Din tells a guy to do something, he's going to be potter, the Reb Shimon. And what about Reb Shimon? What's he going to do with that halacha about when Beis Din gives the wrong instructions? Yachid shasa b'horas Beis Din chayiv. He holds in Maseches Horios that taka, if a guy does something based on the instruction of the Beis Din, erroneously, then he does have to bring a korban because it's consistent. Like he doesn't use the same miyut the way that Rabbi Yehuda does, and therefore he taka holds that if a guy goes ahead and does the malacha based on Beis Din's instructions, he will have to bring a korban. Okay, so now we've explained Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Now let's explain Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir miksiv nefesh techeta achas techeta ba'asosa techeta. Reb Meir argues with the entire premise. The premise that Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda were working under is that there are three exclusionary clauses in this pasuk. Rabbi Meir says, what are you talking about? I only count two. Because the words nefesh achas is one clause. That's one phrase. That's not two separate phrases. And therefore, trei miyut iksiv. There's only two miyuts in the pasuk. Chad lemeute ze'oker v'zemeniach v'chad lemeute yachid shasa b'haras Beis Din. And he says the two exclusionary clauses are A, to exclude when one picks up and one puts down, and B, when a person acts upon the erroneous instructions of the Beis Din. So you see that according to Reb Meir, the pasuk bichlal is not addressing when two people are carrying the object together. And therefore Reb Meir holds consistently that in all those situations where two people carry, they're going to be chayiv, regardless of whether they can carry it independently or whether it's so heavy that you need both of them. Amar Mar. So now let's go on. We saw yesterday a brisa that was a little bit cryptic. It said, Ze yochel v'ze inu yochel. Divrei hakol chayiv. That if you got two guys, one's a starker, a real strong guy, and the other one's a 98-pound weakling, and they're carrying an object together, the starker could carry it by himself, but the weakling cannot. So the brisa says, in that case, he is chayiv. Now, who is he? So the hey minai hu chayiv. Which one of this is chayiv? Is the starker chayiv or is the weakling chayiv? So Amar Rav Chisda zeh sheyochel. He says it's the starker, the strong guy. Why? Dei zeh she'eno yochel my ka'avid. He says because the weakling isn't really contributing anything. Since the starker can carry it by himself, he doesn't need the nebush that's...
And he's not capable of carrying it.
And he's not capable of carrying it himself, so therefore he's not really doing anything. He's not contributing anything, really. So Amar le Rav Hamnuna de Komisaya Bahadeh. So Rav Hamnuna says, what do you mean? He is helping. He's helping. He may not be able to carry the whole thing himself, but he's taking a little bit of the burden off. So Amar le Misayeya ein bo mamish. So his response to Rav Hamnuna was, no, a Misayeya ein bo mamash. There's no substance or there's no significance to a person who's just aiding the primary carrier. Okay, that's the chiddush that we're working with, and we're going to see different applications of that momentarily. Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei Derava Af Ananomi Tanina. We have a brisa or a mishnah to support that, because the mishnah says, in reference to the laws of Tumah, Hayiyoshev al Gabi Hamita va'arba talios tachas raglei Hamita. That let's say you have a zav. Now a zav we know transmits tumas moshav. That means that if he sits on something and he bears his weight down upon an object that can contract tumah, then it becomes tameh, even if he's not physically touching it, but just his weight is bearing down on it. So a guy's sitting on a bed, okay? A bed has 4 legs, and under each leg there's a garment, okay? So the halacha is tameos, that each one of the garments will become tameh, because a bed cannot subsist with 3 legs. You need mamish all 4 legs, and since you need all 4 legs are vital to the support of the bed, and therefore the Zavs is mamish sitting on all four legs, and therefore all four garments become tummy. The Rabbi Shimon mitayr, but Reb Shimon disagrees. Reb Shimon is consistent with his shita in Masechah Shabbos. He says no, you need to have the Zav sitting only on one support, on one thing, and if he's sitting on four different things, right? Since not any one of those things is the exclusive support of his weight, therefore it doesn't transmit tumah. You see that? I mean, it's very consistent. Just like Rav Shimon holds that when two people do a malacha, they're pater, so too when you have multiple 2 or 4 legs that are supporting his weight, none of those legs alone will transmit the tumah of the zav. Hayerochev. Now let's look at the contrast to get the law of misayeya. Hayerochev al gabi behema. Let's say a person is riding an animal. Vidalid taliyos tachas raglei habehema. And the animal's got 4 legs, right? And he's sitting on the animal, and underneath the hoof of each leg of the animal is a garment. In that case, what's the halacha? Tahoros. There, the garments are, each one of them is tahor, because we say, look at each leg independently. Each leg is theoretically not vital to the standing of this animal, because an animal can stand on 3 legs. It can balance itself very, very capably on 3 legs, and it won't fall down. So therefore, any leg of the animal is not a vital support for the animal. It's only a misayeya. It's only a contributing support, but it's not a vital support. And therefore, the tumah is not transmitted. So it's the same principle that we're saying over here. V'amai ha'kemisayeya v'hadei hadadi. Isn't each leg of the animal helping to support to prop up the animal, just like the 98-pound weakling is helping to support the starker? Lav mishum de'amrinan misayeya ein bo mamish. It's the same principle we see from here, that a support which is not necessary does not transmit tumah, just like it's not a contributing carrier to be considered to be doing a melecha Shabbos. Amar Rav Yehuda midiskarta la'olamei melecha misayeya yesh bo mamish. So Rav Yehuda midiskarta suggests, no, that's not a proof. You haven't brought me a proof from the case of the animal with the animal's legs, because maybe it's different over there. Maybe I'll tell you that when something is acting as a support to help prop something up, that does count. However, v'shayni hacha de'akrala legamrei. But over here, not only is an animal's individual leg not considered to be a support, is not a vital support, but also the animal's regularly lifting up that leg. So maybe that's the issue over here. The fact that it's literally disconnecting its leg from the ground periodically is what makes it not going to be a transmitter of tumah to the garment that is underneath its hoof. V'keven dezimnin akra ha v'zimnin akra ha. Oh, okay, so that's the Gemara's challenge, okay?
But Rabbi Shimon learns it out from Lasesa, so that's...
Rabbi Shimon learns it out from...
Lasesa.
So...
It's 2 different things. That's for one person has to do it, not 2.
But we're not discussing. We're not even discussing Rav Shimon now. According to Rav Shimon, in all circumstances, you're pater, right, even if you're not a misayeya. We're speaking now in Rebbe Yehuda. In Rebbe Yehuda, who says that if you need 2 people to carry something, then both of them will be chayav. He agrees that if one guy is a starker and one guy is a weakling, the weakling is pater because misayeya ein bo mamish. Right? Okay. So now the Gemara says as follows: maybe I can argue that the animal case is not a proof to the principle of misayeya ein bo mamish, that a misayeya is not substantive and is not considered to be a contributing factor, because maybe the animal is even less than that. Maybe it's because the animal literally disconnects its foot from the ground periodically, and that's the reason why it's even less than a misayeya. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute. The kaven dezimnin akraha bezimnin akraha lihavi kizav hamishapeich. But wait a minute. By that argument, Rav Yehuda midiskarta, it's true, I will grant you that at times the animal does disconnect its foot from the ground, lifts its foot up from the ground, but it distributes it. Each foot will lift up and each foot will be put down from time to time. And if that's the case, at least reckon with the time that its foot is on the ground. And we have this principle called Safek Tumah based upon a principle called Mishapech, where the source of the Tumah is constantly moving back and forth, and therefore if the Tumah is moving back and forth, at least Misafek we should assign Tumah to a place where the Tumah may have been resting at one time. Milo Tznan, look at the following Mishnah. Zav shahayamuto al hei safsalim. If you have a Zav who was lying on 5 benches, okay, al hei pundaos, or on 5 money bags, using them as cushions, lo orchan tameim lo rachban tahorim. So it depends. If he's lying lengthwise along the length of all the benches, meaning that he's a big, wide body guy, and you have these very narrow benches, and he's resting along the length of all 5 benches, so then clearly he's put all of his weight on all 5 benches, and therefore he transmits tumah to the objects that are underneath the benches and to the benches. However, if he is sleeping or lying along the width of the benches, then at no point can we argue that his whole body weight is distributed on any one bench. In other words, when he's rolling around from bench to bench lengthwise, so that at different times his body weight has been resting upon all 5 benches. He's been lying and then he's been rolling from one side to the next, so his entire body at different intervals has been on each one of the benches. But if the length of his body is going along the width of the benches, so then at no given time has his full body weight been on any one bench. It's been distributed across multiple benches, and therefore we can't say that his body has transmitted tumah to the benches or to the things underneath the benches. But then the Mishnah says, Yoshein, if the guy is sleeping on the benches, and when you're sleeping, your body moves in all crazy different directions, Safek Mishapech Alehem Tamein. And then, if we're not sure if his full body weight got on any one bench, because he might have been lying lengthwise, might have been lying widthwise, he might have been moving around the whole night, right? So then we assign Safek Tumah to each one of the benches. So by that argument, says the Gemara, over here too, you got this animal. If you're holding that Misayeya Yeshbo Mamish, you want to argue, Rabbi Yehuda Midiskarta, that if a support that is not vital but still helps to bear the load is considered to be substantive. If that's the case, and you just want to argue that the lifting up the leg is the reason why the animal does not transmit tumah. Yeah, but sometimes it puts its leg down, and sometimes the other leg is picking up. So it should be just like a zav who's rolling around the benches. We should at least assign a safek tumah based upon that in the case of the animal who's lifting its legs up and down at all different times. So elalav misham damrin and misayeh in bomamish, and therefore Rav Yehuda midiskarta, your challenge is now refuted. The reason why the animal's leg is not going to transmit tumah is not because it lifts it off the ground, but rather because it's a misayeya. It's not vital to the support of the animal, and therefore it doesn't transmit tumah. And the same thing is true by the weakling who's helping to carry. Since he's just a misayeya, he's not liable for the malacha. Amar of Papi Mishmei Darava Af Ananami Tanina. We also have a brisa to support the principle of misayeya in bo mamish. Rabbi Yossi Omer. And Rashi says that this brisa actually disagrees with the previous brisa, which was talking about an animal on all 4 legs, which transmit tumah to all 4 garments that are under the 4 legs. Because over here, the brisa says that it depends on what kind of animal it is. It says hasus mitama al yadav hachamor al raglav. That if you're dealing with a horse, if it's stepping on 4 different garments on its 4 feet, then only the garments that are underneath its front legs are going to be tameh, and by a donkey, just the opposite, only the garments that are underneath its hind legs are going to become tameh. Why? Shemishenes asus al yadav v'chamor al raglav, because the primary support, the balance or the weight, the primary weight of a horse is supported by its front legs.
Front wheel or rear-wheel drive.
Front wheel or wheel drive, right? And the back legs of the donkey are what are the main weight, the main support of the donkey. I guess that's why you never stand behind a donkey, because since its main weight, its main power is on the back legs, you could really get injured.
Get like the horse. You never stand behind the horse.
Oh, you never stand behind a horse either?
Yeah, but however, a horse does walk sometimes on hind legs, but it just ups its front.
Yeah, when it kicks up its front, that's when its hind legs supported.
Right.
But I guess when it's on all fours, the Gemara knew that it was front-wheel drive. Yeah, but in any event, va'amai sefrek the Gemara. But why should that be? Ha kamisayeya bahadi hadadi. Aren't these legs supporting each other? So lav misham darmina misayin bo mamish. In other words, why should you say that a horse's hind legs do not transmit tumah? Aren't they supporting the front legs? You see from here that if they're not vital, but they're only contributing to the support, that it doesn't have mamashas, and it's the same principle over here. Amar Ravashi afananami tanina. We also have a brisa that says the same thing, because it says Rabbi Eliezer Omer raglo echas ala kliv, raglo echas ala ritzpa, raglo echas al ho'even, raglo echas ala ritzpa, roan kil sheilu yinot ala kliv, itinot al even, yocholam ala raglo echas abodasok sheira. So what we're talking about over here is kohanim. We're no longer talking about animals. We're talking about kohanim, even though some kohanim may be animals. No, but I can say that I'm a kohen, right? But but the halacha over here is like as follows, because we know that a kohen, in order for his avoda, in order for his service in the temple to be kosher, he has to have both feet without any separation between his foot and the ground. Has to be on the ground in order for his avoda to be kosher in the temple. So let's say he's got one foot on the ground in the Azara, and one foot on some kind of prop, either it's a kli or a stone, that's not on the floor of the temple. So what's the halacha? So you look at it as follows. If his primary weight is on the foot that's on the ground, such that were you to pull away the prop, he wouldn't fall over, so then the avodah is kosher. But if not, the avodah is puzzle, because the primary weight is on the foot that's not resting on the ground. Now, by the way, we have a practical application of this halacha in practical halacha as well. Anyone know what I'm thinking of? We know that there's a halacha that when you're davening Shmon Esrei, you have to be standing. You're not allowed to be sitting or lying down. So we know the halacha in Shulchan Aruch states that if you're leaning on something, then to the criterion as to whether you're considered to be standing or not is if you would pull it away, you pull the stender away, would you fall over or not? It's the same principle as over here, right? Is your weight on the floor or is on the kli that is on the other foot? So the Gemara says, "V'amai hakem esayeya bahadi hadadi." But why? Just because your weight is on the foot that's on the floor, it's a kosher avoda, but aren't you being supported by the foot also that's on the prop? Lav mishum damrina misayein bo mamish. This shows you very clearly that even lakula we say misayein bo mamish. Amar Ravina af ananami tanina. We also have a similar brisa having to do with the avodah of kohanim. It says kibel biyaminu small misayaso avodasuk sheira. That we know that in order for a kohen's avodah to be kosher, it has to be done with the right hand, not with the left hand. What happens if a kohen is holding the receptacle to receive the blood after the slaughter in his right hand, but he props it with his left hand? Is that kosher or not? So we say that it's kosher. But isn't the left hand acting as a support, and therefore it should passel the avoda? Lav mishum darmina misayin b'mamish mamina. All of this proves the same point, that misayeya does not have any substance. This also has practical applications. When you make Kiddush Friday night, you have to hold the kos in your right hand. Are you allowed to support it with your left hand if you're scared it's going to wobble and spill? The answer is yes. Lechatchila, it's best to just hold it in your left hand. But since Misayeya in Bomamish, if you want to support it, if you feel you need to support it with your left hand, that's okay, as long as the main weight is on your right hand. You see this? Isn't that beautiful?
Does it matter if you're left-handed or not?
It does matter if you're left-handed. There's a shita, I don't remember how we paskin vis-a-vis Kohanim, but a Kohen who's a lefty is a Balmum, if I'm not mistaken, since he can't do his avoda with his right hand. So you don't have Kohanim that are southpaws in the temple, if my memory serves me correctly. And as far as Kiddush Friday night, I think that if you're a lefty, then you hold it in your left hand. But I have to double check the halacha, but I believe that that's the halacha.
With leaning on the Shemon Esrei, like if you're leaning up against a wall or to the side, so is the halacha that you would actually fall over, or it doesn't? Or
if you were to fall over, were that object to be removed, then that's not a
that
good
moment when your weight is on.
Then it's not a valid position to take during Shemon Esrei. Let's go weiter. Amar Mar, Ze Yachol v'Ze Yachol. So, we had learned before that according to Reb Meir, even when both people are capable of carrying it themselves, and therefore it's not really a normal carrying when two guys carry a loaf of bread, nevertheless Rabbi Meir mechayev. Rabbi Meir says in all situations you're chayev. So now let's analyze Rabbi Meir. Iboyelahu, bo'inun shir lezeh v'shir lezeh, odil mashir echad l'kulam. Now the object that's being carried, we always have spoken about a minimum shear, a minimum measurement for the object that's being carried in order to make you chayev. According to Reb Meir, two people who carry a loaf of bread are going to be chayev. Do you need for the loaf of bread to be the size of 2 grogeros? So therefore each one of them has his own respective measurement. Or, since we're making them chayev for a joint malacha, we also make them chayev when the object is only the size of 1 grogeris, of 1 shear. That's the question. So Rav Chisda v'Rav Hamnuna chad omer shir lezeh v'shir lezeh v'chad omer shir echad l'kul, and it's a machlokas amoraim. One says no, in order for them to be chayiv, even according to Rav Meir, the object that they're carrying has to be enough so that each one of them has a shear. And the other Mando Amar says no, since they're both going to be chayiv by carrying this one object, since they're sharing in this object's carrying, it only has to be the size of 1 shear of a grogeres. Amar Rav Papa Mishmei de Rava Af Ananami Tanina. We can support the shita that says that the object only has to be 1 shear, based upon the following brisa: Yoseph al gabi mita v'arba taliyos tachas arba ragli amita temeos mipnei she'eni yachol lamod al shalosh. Let's go back to the case of the zav. The zav is sitting on the bed. There are 4 garments under the 4 legs of the bed. All 4 garments are going to be tamei. Why? Because all 4 legs of the bed are vital to support the bed. So now the question is, vamai. But that's all well and good, but we have another problem. Liboy shir ziva lozeh v'shir ziva lozeh. But wait a minute. When does a zav transmit tumah? When a complete whole human being is sitting on an object. When you've got one human being sitting on 4 different weights that are supporting a bed, then no individual leg of the bed has the full weight of this human being who's a zav. It's only got a quarter of the weight of the zav on any one leg. So therefore, why should there be a transmission of tumah? Lav mishum d'amrinan shir echad l'kul. And it's only because we say that when they're equally sharing in the distribution of and the support of the object, then you don't need the source of the isser, the object of the isser, to be multi-sheared. It doesn't. You don't have to have 1 shear for each thing. You only need to have 1 shear. And similarly over here, the loaf of bread only has to be 1 shear the size of a grogeres. That's the analogy. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak af ananomi tanina. We have another brisa to support that. It says Tzvi shenichnas labayis v'nochel echad b'fanav chayav no alu shnayim peturim. That we know there's a halacha called Seder or Tzad, that you're not allowed to trap an animal on Shabbos. A deer runs into my house and I close the door. By closing the door, I've trapped the animal, so I've done a malacha on Shabbos. And therefore I'm chayav. What happens if 2 people close the door? So then they're going to be patur, because this is according to Rabbi Yehuda now, because since it could have been done by 1 person, it was done by 2. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to be patur. Lo yachol echad linol v'nolu shnayim chayavim. But if let's say the door was so heavy, or the stock, the beam that you put on the door to lock the door is so heavy that you need 2 people to pick it up and put it on the door, so then, since that's the normal way of doing that act of locking, then they'll both be chayav. So the question is, v'amai liboy shir tzeda lazeh v'shir l'tzeda lazeh. Okay, fine. You've got 2 guys that need to pick up the stock to lock the door. But wait a minute. If each one of them is going to be chayiv, shouldn't the object that they're doing the malacha with be enough so that each one of them has the shear of an active tzeda? If there's only 1 deer, then I'm trapping a half a deer and you're trapping half a deer, right? So therefore, you see that what? Lav mishum darminan shir echad l'kulam. You see that all you need is 1. The object has to be 1 measurement to distribute to both guys. You don't need the amount of 2 measurements for 2 people. You only need the object to be 1 measurement, and it's enough to make them both chayiv. Amar Ravina Afana Nomi Tanina, we also have a proof to this. Hashutfin Shaganvu V'Tavchu Chayovin. That if you have two people who steal, or two people who slaughter someone else's animal, we know the halacha in both cases by tvicha or geneva or tvicha, the halacha is as follows. If I steal your goat or I steal your cow, I have to pay either dalet or hay. If for a case of when I steal your cow, I have to pay 5 times the value if the animal is sold or slaughtered, and if it's a lamb or a sheep or a goat, I have to pay 4 times the value to make restitution to you. If partners do it, if 2 guys do it together, they're also going to be chayav. Va'amai liboy shir tvicha lazeh v'shir tvicha lazeh. But if the 2 of them are slaughtering the animal jointly, then neither one of them is slaughtering a full animal. And therefore the problem is, the object that is causing them to be liable, it does not have the requisite amount for them individually. The answer is lav mishum damrinan shiracha lekulam. It must be because, like we're saying before, when 2 people are chayiv jointly for doing an isser, the object that is being used to consummate the isser only has to be 1 shear. It doesn't have to be 2 shiurim to distribute. Va'amar Ravashi afananomi tanina. Ravashi says, well, I also can prove it. Shnaim shehotziu kana shel gardi chayavim. That if 2 people carry a weaver's rod, they're going to be chayiv. Now, what's a weaver's rod? It's used, if my understanding is correct, you use it to weave through the warp and the woof of the loom, and it typically has yarn wrapped around it. Okay? So if 2 guys carry this outside on Shabbos jointly, they're going to be chayiv. V'amai liboy shir hotzah lazeh v'shir hotzah lazeh. But why should that be? Maybe this is a weaver's rod which is so small that it doesn't have the requisite shear for both of them jointly. Lav mishum damrinan shirecha lekulam. It must be that you only need 1 measurement for both of them. So Amarle Ravacha berei the Rav Ravashi. So Ravacha protests against this last proof. He says that's not necessarily a proof. Dilma deispe kedei lavashel beit zakala lazeh ubeit zakala lazeh. Remember, we learned that when it comes to something that can be used for kindling, the minimum shear of how much you need in order to be liable for carrying is if you could use this to make a fire that is enough to cook a chicken's egg, then that's what's going to make you liable for carrying. Maybe this weaver's rod is so large that it's large enough that if you threw it in the fire, you could cook 2 eggs with it. And maybe that's the reason why these guys are chayav. Maybe it's because the weaver's rod does taka have the shear for 2 guys, and not just 1 measurement. Imkain lishmeinan kana da alma. Maishma de Gardi. So Rav Ashi's response, well, then why did the Brisa use the example of a weaver's rod? Just use an example of a bamboo stick. So the Gemara says, no. Maybe the reason why we chose the example of a weaver's rod is because it's not meant for kindling. It's meant for using as a tool for weaving. And when it comes to the measurement for using tools for weaving, guess what? As long as you could make a small little piece of fabric with this weaver's rod, there's enough yarn around it to make a little cloth, a kerchief for each guy, then that's enough to make you liable. And maybe this weaver's rod is large enough so that it's got enough yarn that you could make a little cloth for each one of them, and therefore you don't have a proof from here. So elamihal elamishma mina. See, the Gemara says you're right. Rav Ashi, your last proof is not a winner. In other words, you can't prove from here that you only need 1 shear for both. Tani Tana Kameder Rav Nachman Shnaim Shehotziu Kana Shel Gardi Peturim. We have a brisa that was taught before Rav Nachman, which states that if 2 people carry a weaver's rod outside, they're both going to be potter. Rav Shimon Mechayv, and Rav Shimon says you're chayv. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Klapi Laya? Is this going in the right direction? Rav Shimon is the one who says that anytime 2 people do a malacha, they're always potter. So how can Rav Shimon be the one to say chayav over here? So Ela Ema Chayav and Rav Shimon potter. So Rav Nachman says the brisa is upside down. The way you read it is as follows: that according to the Tanakama, who is either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Meir, we're not sure, if 2 people carry a weaver's rod, they're going to be chayav. And according to Rav Shimon, you're always going to be potter when 2 guys carry something together. Okay, we're just going to do the Mishnah now. I'm going to leave the rest of it for Rabbi Torchiner. He said that he's going to start with the Mishnah tomorrow anyway. Let's just take a look at the Mishnah very, very briefly. Hamotzi ochlin pachos mikashir b'chli potter afalakli shakli tfelalo. If a person carries an amount of food that is smaller than the size of a grogeres, so we learned before that he's potter, he hasn't done the malacha. What happens if he takes a piece of food smaller than the size of a grogeres and is carrying it in its container? And the container, in and of itself, does have a requisite shear for carrying something. But the whole purpose of the container is to hold the food. Since he's not liable for the food, he's also not liable for carrying the container. And the reason is because the whole function of the container is to be ancillary to the food. And since I'm potter for the food, I'm also going to be potter for the container. However, es achai b'mita potter afal amita shamita tefelo. Furthermore, if a person is going to, let's say, carry a living person on a stretcher, and he carries that person outside, even though were he to carry an empty stretcher, he'd be liable for carrying a stretcher on Shabbos. But since the whole purpose of the stretcher is as a tafel, it's ancillary to the living person, and you're putter for carrying a living person on Shabbos, you're also going to be putter for carrying the stretcher. Now, why are you putter from carrying a living person on Shabbos? Because we have a principle called chai hachai nosei es atzmo, that a living person carries himself. It's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, if I'm not mistaken, that even though you're physically bearing the weight of a living person, but when it comes to the laws of Shabbos, since a living person has animation, he's considered to be carrying himself instead of you carrying him. And that's why living people are generally lighter than corpses.
Even if the person's on a stretcher, hence maybe incapable of keeping.
Even if the person's in a coma, yeah. But the fact that he's just alive, we have a principle of chai nosei es atzmo. And as hameis b'mita chayiv. If, however, you carry a corpse on a stretcher outside on Shabbos, then you're going to be chai for doing the malacha. It's not clear from the Mishnah yet whether the stretcher here too is tafel to the mace or not. It doesn't seem to be relevant. It's a moot point, because the bottom line is that since you carried the corpse, you're going to be chayiv. V'chein kezayis min hameis u'chazayis min hanavelo d'chadosh min asheretz chayiv. And similarly, any time you carry an amount of an object which is the source of tumah, since it has chashivas because it transmits tumah, it also has chashivas vis-a-vis the laws of carrying. And therefore, if you carry a kazayis of a corpse, of corpse flesh, or from a nevela, from carrion, or if you carry even the size of a lentil from a dead sheretz, then you're going to be chayiv, because these items have chashivas as far as tumah transmission. They also have chashivas vis-a-vis laws of Shabbos. And the Reb Shimon poter. And Reb Shimon says you're going to be poter. Now, why does Reb Shimon say that you're poter? Reb Shimon here is addressing a corpse. And Reb Shimon holds that when you transport a corpse on Shabbos, you're doing what's called the malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. Why am I transporting the corpse? Is it for the sake of the corpse? Am I doing it for the corpse, or am I doing it for another reason? In other words, what I mean to say is like this. When I transport a corpse on Shabbos, is it because I need the corpse? Is it because I have some use for the corpse? That's normally why you carry something. But let's say I'm carrying the corpse because I want to get it out of the house. Or I'm transporting the corpse because I don't want the corpse to become putrid. I'm not doing it for any utility of my own. I'm doing it for the sake of the corpse or for the sake of the house. And therefore that's what's called a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, where it's not being done for the objective of a normal malacha being done. And therefore Reb Shimon says you're going to be potter in that scenario. And that's why, and the Gemara will analyze this further, but according to Reb Shimon, anytime you move a corpse, it's not for the standard objective of a malacha, and therefore you're going to be potter. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a great day.